President Yoon has granted a special pardon to over 1,000 people ahead of National Liberation Day, including political heavyweights, and he has restored the political rights of key liberal politician Kim Kyung-soo. Extreme heat is putting pressure on the country's power grid and causing a number of heat-related illnesses and livestock damage. Democratic presidential candidate Kamala Harris is quickly turning the tide since joining the race, with a new U.S. poll suggesting she is leading over Republican Donald Trump in the national polling average. It's August 13th, 6 p.m. in Seoul. This is Newscenter. Thank you for joining us. I'm Yoon Jung-min. We start with the President's Liberation Day pardons, which included more than 1,200 people. As expected, President Yoon today made it possible for Kim Kyung-soo, a key figure in the opposition, to get back into politics. Our correspondent Kim Do-yeon explains its significance.
In light of the upcoming National Liberation Day, President Yoon has paved the way for the return to politics for a key opposition figure, restoring the rights of Kim Kyung-soo, a former Gyeongsangnam-do province governor who was convicted of manipulating a number of online comment sections to help former President Moon Jae-in's election win in 2017. On Tuesday, the Justice Ministry announced that a total of 55 politicians have been included in the customary National Liberation Day pardon and clemency list.
In particular, by granting pardons to those involved in public opinion manipulation, regardless of political affiliation, we aim to resolve the resulting political conflicts and create an opportunity to move forward in unity for the sake of national interest.
Kim was pardoned back in December 2022, which only got him out of jail early, but he was prohibited from running for public office until December 2027. Kim is considered a key figure in the main opposition Democratic Party of Korea, and with this, he's now able to run for public office. In 2026 is the nationwide local elections, and in 2027, there is the next presidential election. And other politicians among the pardoned included Cho Yoon-sun, a former culture minister under former President Park Geun-hye, who was convicted for creating a blacklist of cultural figures. Meanwhile, in terms of the total list, President Yoon pardoned 1,219 people. More than 410,000 were also relieved of administrative penalties. Many of these were returning driving privileges to people who need to drive for their jobs.
This pardon was primarily focused on revitalizing the struggling economy for ordinary citizens amid concerns about a global economic downturn, and on creating an opportunity for national unity and harmony.
In the meantime, the Justice Ministry says that 20 of the pardons made were for financial crimes business owners convicted due to being unable to pay off their debt. However, the ministry emphasizes there were no pardons for non-face-to-face online frauds targeting a large, unspecified number of people. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
The cabinet also proposed that President Yoon declined two opposition-led bills that the National Assembly recently approved despite strong objections from the ruling party. One bill would provide a one-time economic relief payment in the form of vouchers worth around 250,000 Korean won, or roughly around $180 to each South Korean. The other is a pro-labor bill that limits companies' claims for damages against striking workers. Prime Minister Han Duck-soo called these legislative actions regrettable, saying they could burden the economy and the nation's fiscal health. The president can decide whether to reject the proposed legislation by August 20th. Once rejected, the bills will return to the National Assembly for a revote. President Yoon on Tuesday declared new special disaster zones following severe damage caused by heavy rain. The regions include 4 townships in Paju City, Gyeonggi-do Province, and Dangjin City in Chungcheongnam-do Province. This comes after the government designated 11 regions as special disaster zones in mid-July. Yoon noted that despite the monsoon season having ended late last month, residents of affected regions are still suffering from the fallout. He called on the Minister of Interior and Safety and other cabinet members to swiftly carry out restoration projects and ensure disaster relief funds and other support measures are effectively delivered. The president also raised the need for thorough preparation as weather authorities predict there could be more rainfall than usual this year. The country is experiencing record-high electricity demand due to the ongoing heat wave. The sweltering weather this summer has led to a rise in heat-related illnesses and has caused significant damage to livestock and the fisheries sector. Yoon brings the details.
South Korea's electricity demand hit a record high on Monday, with more people switching on their air conditioning units due to the intense summer heat. Data from the Korea Power Exchange on Tuesday reveals that peak power demand reached around 102.3 gigawatts between 2 to 3 p.m. on Monday, surpassing the previous record of 100.5 gigawatts set last August. Such a surge in demand comes as South Korea is experiencing sweltering temperatures. The country's meteorological center reported a high of around 34 degrees Celsius in Seoul on Monday. Additionally, Seoul has experienced a 23-day streak of tropical nights with minimum temperatures of at least 25 degrees. The total number of heat-related illnesses this year, from May 20th to August 11th, has reached almost 2,300. This surpasses last year's total for the same period of around 2,100 cases. The total number of heat-related deaths reported this year stands at 21. The heat wave has also significantly affected livestock and fisheries. Between June 11th and August 12th, over 700,000 animals have died due to extreme temperatures. In the fisheries sector, nearly 900,000 fish have perished. In the coming days, most regions nationwide are expected to experience extreme heat, with field-like temperatures of around 35 degrees Celsius. Tropical nights are also forecast for many areas of the country, particularly along the west coast. Meanwhile, experts say the country's electricity consumption is likely to increase, even more so due to increased demand in the semiconductor industry, as well as a greater need for air conditioning and EV charging. Yoon, Arirang News.
Amid a recent resurgence in COVID-19, the health authorities plan to strengthen responses to curb the spread. According to an official from the Korea Disease Control and Prevention Agency on Tuesday, COVID cases are expected to peak in late August as people return from vacations, increasing their contacts. The officials added that inadequate ventilation due to air conditioning is a major factor behind the summer surge. In response, the agency has decided to expand its virus response team and buy more treatments this month to better control the outbreak. The government also plans to resume its vaccination campaign in October, with high-risk groups receiving vaccines for free. Over in the U.S., a new poll shows Vice President Kamala Harris leading over former President Donald Trump, quickly turning the tide with less than 3 months left until the election. Choi Min-jung reports.
3 weeks into the U.S. presidential race, Democratic candidate and Vice President Kamala Harris is witnessing a quick turnaround in the polls. According to the national polling average kept by The Hill and Decision Desk HQ, Harris has taken the lead over her rival, former President Donald Trump. As of Monday, Harris led by 0.3 percentage points at 47.6% based on 111 different polls. Although it's a narrow margin, it's the first time Harris has surpassed Trump in the national polling average. This is also a significant improvement from U.S. President Joe Biden's numbers. When Biden dropped out 3 weeks ago, Trump had a 2.3-point lead. Numbers also showed that Harris led Trump by 3.7 points when independent candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr. was included in the mix. Polls are moving in the vice president's favor in King's swing states as well. A new poll from the New York Times and Siena College shows Harris taking the lead over Trump in 3 battleground states, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. Republicans say Harris is still in a honeymoon period that will soon end and bring her polling back down. The Hill says an increase is often temporary, and the upcoming debate between Harris and Trump could further shake up the race in unpredictable ways. Choi Min-jung, Arirang News.
Also on the international front, an Iranian attack against Israel may reportedly happen this week in retaliation for the assassination of a top Hamas figure in Tehran. Israel has raised its alert status to the maximum level, and Western leaders have issued a joint statement calling for Iran to stand down. Cha Yoon has the latest.
The White House says a potential Iranian attack on Israel could come anytime soon. The U.S. and Israel have analyzed that Iran is prepared to launch what could be a significant set of attacks within a few days.
We share the same concerns and expectations that our Israeli counterparts have with respect to potential timing here. Could be this week. We're continuing to watch it very, very closely.
Fox News, quoting regional sources, said Iran and its proxies could attack Israel within the next 24 hours in retaliation for the killing of Hamas political leader Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran late last month. Israeli military spokesperson Daniel Hagari says that Israel takes seriously the statements and remarks by its enemies, and therefore, Israel is at peak preparedness for attack and defense. Meanwhile, Hezbollah has recently fired rockets in northern Israel. The U.S. has sent a guided missile submarine to the Middle East as tensions grow in the region. Western leaders issued a joint statement on Monday local time calling for Iran to stand down. U.S. President Joe Biden and the leaders of France, Germany, Italy, and the UK called on Iran to stand down its ongoing threats of a military attack against Israel and discuss the serious consequences for regional security should such an attack take place. Western leaders also endorsed a push for ceasefire and hostage deals in Gaza. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken will travel to the Middle East this week as the United States seeks to propose a ceasefire and hostage release deal to bring an end to the war in Gaza. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz and Britain's Prime Minister Keir Starmer have also called on Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian this week to exercise restraint and refrain from any actions that could lead to a wider conflict in the region. Cardinal Pietro Parolin, in a telephone conversation with Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian, reportedly expressed deep concern over the conflict in the Middle East, reiterating the need to avoid the conflict and preferring every effort for dialogue, negotiation, and peace. Cha Yoon, Arirang News.
Elsewhere, Ukrainian ground forces continue to make significant advances into Russian territory, while Russia's Vladimir Putin vows to respond. Lee Seung-jae covers this reality and its implications.
On the 7th day of Ukraine's incursion into Russian territory, Kyiv's top military commander, General Alexander Syrskyi, said Monday that his forces have now taken control of over 1,000 square kilometers of the Kursk region. That's an area 1.5 times larger than South Korea's capital, Seoul. According to acting Kursk governor Alexei Smirnov, Ukraine has taken control of 28 villages. Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky posted a video on social media platform X saying that he has ordered the military to establish a humanitarian plan within the operational area while seeking a strategy for returning prisoners of war. He's also seeking to obtain permission from the West to use long-range weapons. As Ukraine continues to push ahead in its offensive inside Russian territory, Russian President Vladimir Putin presided over an operational meeting on Monday. According to Russia's TASS News, the Russian leader instructed his forces to drive the Ukrainian military out of its territory and ensure stable border security. Putin also claimed that Kyiv launched attacks on the mainland to gain an advantage in future peace negotiations while destabilizing Russian society. He slammed Ukraine for its provocation that resulted in many casualties and vowed to respond appropriately. Concerns are also rising that the natural gas transport routes to Europe will be blocked due to the Ukrainian offensives in the border areas of Russia's mainland, where its natural gas facilities are located. Natural gas produced in Siberia is exported mainly to countries like Slovakia, Hungary, and Austria through a pipeline located in the Kursk region. Last year, half of all Russian natural gas exports to Europe were supplied through this pipeline. Europe experienced a temporary energy crisis when the Nord Stream gas pipeline exploded in September 2022, allegedly due to sabotage. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
In other news, Korea's webtoon industry is incorporating artificial intelligence as part of efforts to enhance the overall entertainment experience for its fans. Our Moon Hae-ryun tells us more.
Since their emergence some 2 decades ago, South Korean webtoons have rapidly evolved over the years. As the name suggests, webtoons are digital comics that can be scrolled through in the palm of the reader's hand on a smartphone device. Easy accessibility and the wide scope of content have drawn in younger generations around the world.
So I think that's definitely how webtoon has become so popular here in the West, and how people just started to become more open to different kinds of platforms and different kinds of storytelling.
Now, South Korean webtoon companies have been tasked with integrating the latest technology boom into the scene for the tech-savvy audience: artificial intelligence. Naver's webtoon introduced a toon filter last year, turning user photos into webtoon-style art, generating over 90 million images globally. Recently, it added AI-driven features like character chat and webtoon caricature to its mobile app for even more personalized experiences.
By integrating AI technology with IP, we hope that fans will be able to immerse themselves in webtoons beyond just reading. They can become participants in the story.
Character chat enables users to converse with their favorite webtoon characters through representative AI chatbots. And a month since its debut, more than 1 million users have accessed the service. Webtoon Caricature is an elevated version of the former Toon Filter service that kicked off in July. Anyone can become a webtoon character with this latest AI service. Just snap a selfie and wait for the image to load. Currently, these services are provided only on the domestic platform, but Naver could be expanding to its global audience due to the popularity of its immersive AI services. Kakao Webtoon, on the other hand, is using AI algorithms through its Helix curation service to recommend users to other webtoons after analyzing their purchase and reading history. But with the increasing usage of AI in the webtoon industry, creators say that there is a need for more concrete guidelines and laws.
If regulations and guidelines for generative AI are more firmly established as legal regulations, I think authors can use AI more actively and integrate it into their work.
The use of generative AI is fast becoming a global issue across many media forms. How South Korean webtoons will continue to draw in readers and adapt to the changing AI landscape remains to be seen. Moon Hae-ryun, Arirang News.
Korean actor Cha In-pyo's novel addressing the issue of comfort women has been globally received, with the prestigious Oxford University having selected it as reading material. Cha recently talked to Arirang TV's program The Globalists about his novel, and before the full episode is out, our Kim Bo-kyung gives us a sneak peek.
An actor and a writer whose writing is to be studied at one of most prestigious universities in the world. That is Cha In-pyo, whose novel Once We Look at the Same Star was selected as reading material for Korean studies classes from next semester at Oxford University. He was even invited as a guest speaker at the university's inaugural Korean Literature Festival on June 28th. His inspiration to address the issue of comfort women came when he saw on TV a woman known as Grandma Hoon coming back home from Cambodia in 1997. She was just 16 years old when taken from her hometown by the Japanese army and forced into sexual slavery, known euphemistically as comfort woman. Korea was liberated from Japanese colonial rule in 1945, but many comfort women, including Grandma Hoon, could not come back home out of shame. She lived half a century in the Cambodian jungle until she came across a Korean traveler to whom she expressed her wish to go back home. Though she lost her language, her identity, she could sing the Korean folk song Arirang, and that moved his heart.
My heart was aching because of the mixed feeling of, I would say, sadness, anger, and disappointment, humiliation. When I thought of these comfort women, this word, what if, kept coming to my mind. What if? What if these women were not taken away, had not been taken away, and somehow could have stayed home? These what ifs were my questions, so I started writing my novel.
Filled with resentment, he started writing a novel. But such intense, negative emotion could not sustain him, and when his laptop broke, he just gave up. 6 years later, he started writing again, motivated not by political sentiment, but to let his children know the painful history of comfort women. He adds that when we fully empathize with the pain of one era, the next generation will not have to suffer the same pain.
Whether you are Korean or Japanese or from any other country in the world, if we gather together and fully emphasize the pain of comfort women together, then I think the genuine apology, not the forced one, will emerge from there, as well as the true reconciliation for the next generation.
The full episode of Changpyo's in-depth story will be on air on The Globalists on Wednesday at 4:50 p.m. Korea time. 김보경, 아리랑 뉴스.
A day before Balbok, traditionally one of the last hot days of the year, temperatures have hovered at 35 degrees Celsius. There were some showers today, but most will stop by tonight. Some southern parts of Gyeonggi-do province and northern areas of the Chungcheong-do provinces will continue to see rain until early tomorrow morning. Humidity levels have increased due to the continuous showers. Currently, heat wave warnings are in place in most parts of the country, and Seoul will soar to 35 degrees tomorrow. In addition, UV rays will also be very strong during the day. Tomorrow's Seoul and Jeju will start off at 27 degrees. Daytime temperatures will move up to 34 in Daejeon and Gwangju, Daegu and Busan 33 degrees. After National Liberation Day on Thursday, the scorching heat and tropical nights will continue. Please stay healthy. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world. That is Newscenter for tonight. Thank you for watching. A panel session coming up.
Hello and welcome to Within the Frame. I'm Handarin Seoul. The semiconductor industry is often seen as the backbone of modern technology. For South Korea, it's the backbone of the nation's export-driven economy. And the country's leading chip makers are now standing at a critical juncture faced with heated global competition for advanced chips for the next generation of artificial intelligence platforms. While SK Hynix is forecast to retain the crown as HBM leader this year with a global market share of over 50%, Samsung Electronics is not far behind with ambitious plans to mass produce advanced HBM memory chips from the third quarter. But challenges remain amid renewed fears over the AI bubble, geopolitical tensions, and U.S. election uncertainties. On this episode of Within the Frame, we look into the latest issues surrounding the global AI chip race and look ahead to the challenges and opportunities South Korea faces in the global market. To help us navigate through the complexities, Yang Jun-seok, economics professor at the Catholic University of Korea, joins us. It's always great to see you, Professor Yang.
Happy to be here.
Also with us tonight is Kim Hwa-gyun, professor of banking and finance at Texas A&M University's Mays Business School. Welcome, as always.
Pleasure to be here.
All right, Professor Yang, I want to start with you. South Korea logged the largest current account surplus in 7 years in June, driven, of course, by robust semiconductor exports. Could you first break down chip exports for the month of June and also give us your overall assessment of semiconductor recovery in the first half of this year?
Okay, well, the Bank of Korea balance of payment figures show that during the first half of the year, semiconductor exports recorded nearly $67 billion. That's up 50.4% by value from last year. Now, BOK's balance of payment data tracks the other data that we have for exports, the customs monthly data. Nice thing about the customs data is that they give more details on exports. And what the customs figures showed during the first half of the year is that the higher exports are due to, first, higher demand for semiconductors, and then higher prices for memory chips, and third, increased sales of higher value-added chips, such as the HBM, high bandwidth memory chips that you've mentioned for AIs, and also SSD memories for servers. The growth of exports has taken both in terms of value, volume, and price. But the growth numbers perhaps are even higher this year because last year's export numbers were so bad. 2023 exports compared to 2022 exports are down 35%. So a lot of the 50.4% growth number is recovery from that low we had last year. And that was partially because during the pandemic, the semiconductor users had hoarded chips, so we had to wait until that inventory ran out. And then it was helped this year by investment into AI, which has caught popular imagination, but it's not entirely clear if the increased demand from AI investment will be permanent. The AI sector is facing some pushback as technology growth has slowed a bit, but the consensus seems to be that the increased demand and exports for semiconductors will last at least until the first half of next year.
Samsung Electronics' second quarter profit jumped 15-fold to nearly $8 billion in soaring chip demand, while SK Hynix earnings during the same period also hit a record high on AI chip boom. So quite a strong recovery there. But as you floated the question, Professor Yang, questions remain on whether AI investment will be permanent, which leads us to our next question, Dr. Kim. Despite record profit, shares of Samsung Electronics and SK Hynix tumbled last week amid growing fears of an AI bubble. Now, investor concerns intensified that AI might not be the technological marvel it's cracked up to be, with Goldman Sachs issuing a warning last month. What renewed fears over an AI bubble burst, and what impact would it have on Korean companies going forward?
So there could be several factors at play here. So clearly, as you mentioned, in Also, as Professor Young mentioned, there's a worry that AI-related stocks may be being pushed to unsustainable levels due to hype rather than fundamental value. I mean, there's clearly uncertainty about AI's real-world impact and whether it will deliver the revolutionary changes and economic benefits that's been promised. Lastly, there are some concerns about also the sustainability of the surge in demand for these HBM memories and other the new chips. And along this line, the Samsung and the SKs, who are the major players, actually the stock price has actually been pushed back because of these worry. But I checked the stock price actually today, and it seems to be in recovery mode. So I don't know if this is really a big pushback, because there was some down, but I think it's going up. And also other big tech companies in the US, such as NVIDIA and the Apple and other company stock prices are in recovery mode. So it is true that these things are still quite uncertain, and the industry's true potential should unravel as this time goes by. But still, clearly, the most of these big companies actually are still increasing their investment for the AI-related businesses, and also the supply of this HBM chips are still in short supply. So I think for the time being, there will be ups and downs, but overall, the outlook of the market seems to be much brighter than I think the recent the hiccups of the stock market. And as I said, I think the market corrections seem to be, again, kind of done for the time being.
Over $12 billion are estimated to be injected into the AI sector every quarter, but investors are concerned that, as you pointed out, whether the future return on the massive investment will bear fruit. But also, as you pointed out, the AI industry is expected to continue its growth. Professor Young, Samsung Electronics has announced it'll begin mass producing 5th generation 8-layer HBM3E products, the crown jewel of AI performance, in the third quarter. And there was a loud noise over whether the company had passed NVIDIA's certification. How do you view the impact of frequent rumors on Samsung, and what are your expectations for the company's HBM3E production?
Well, my personal expectation is that Samsung's new chip will pass the NVIDIA test, but even if it doesn't, Samsung will continue to do relatively well in the near future. And by near future, I mean the next year or so. The semiconductor market as a whole is still booming. It's still in the recovery stage from the low purchases that we had last year. And while Samsung may have fallen behind SK Hynix in terms of HBM chips, and perhaps even if, and I doubt that personally, but even if the new HBM chips by Samsung are judged inferior to the Hynix chips, there's still a lot of demand for HBM chips, even if they may not be fully as good as other options available. So Samsung will get sufficient number of customers to keep themselves in business, though they may be getting perhaps a bit lower price than had it passed NVIDIA's test. But also Samsung's still the largest memory chip maker. Samsung is still the second largest foundry in the world. So they will do well, at least for the short and medium term. What may be worrying, though, is that in the IT industry, the winner tends to take a large share of the market, usually be the majority of the market. And those leading firms tend to be technology leaders overall. They may fall behind in one or two small areas, but on average, they tend to be technology leaders, not only with hardware like semiconductors, but also services and software as well. And perhaps the concern is that they fell behind SK Hynix, perhaps because they were too complacent. That was the reasoning behind Samsung Electronics changing the management earlier this year. And if Samsung keeps on stumbling, then they may give up their leading position. I think that's the concern that's hidden behind all the discussion that is going on right now. It's happening to Intel, apparently. Their last two generations of chips had technical problems, including heat problems that can cause permanent damage to their chips. And because of that, they seem to be losing a lot of their momentum, falling behind NVIDIA. We obviously don't want that for Samsung, so they have time to change. Hopefully, they'll learn from this lesson and they'll keep on their toes.
Zooming in on SK Hynix, the company is set to receive up to $450 million in grants from the U.S. government, which is aimed at funding the company's advanced packaging plant and R&D facility for AI products in U.S. state of Indiana. Professor Kim, how do you evaluate the subsidy in relation to SK's investment there, and how much do you think it'll enhance SK's global competitiveness?
Well, as you mentioned earlier, I think SK has announced plans to invest significantly in the U.S. over the next, 5 to 10 years, and they received this, huge amount of grant, and this actually is about like 11 to 12% of the total planned investment, I believe, and its significance, of course, goes beyond actually the monetary value. The subsidy is specifically earmarked for this packaging plant and R&D facilities for AI in Indiana, but it obviously aligns well with the U.S. interest in bolstering domestic semiconductors capabilities and SK's global expansion strategy, I believe. And I think this probably will enhance SK's market presence and access in the U.S. I mean, it's a big company already, but clearly by establishing a stronger foothold in the U.S. market, SK Hynix positions should be closer to major U.S. tech companies. And also this type of proximity, I think, is important in an industry where the close collaboration is important. So the synergy actually is there. And also, I think it works well as a diversification strategy because it reduces the SK's dependence on Asian manufacturing bases, especially probably China, and therefore it may mitigate some of the geopolitical risks. And also, I think it's going to basically help the SK to just negotiate with the U.S. companies, etc. So overall, I think this is pretty good news. The existing risk probably is depending on the U.S. elections of the presidents. I think the subsidy plan may change, and also its timing actually may change as well. So that kind of things could be some grain of salt, and the investors as well as the company probably have to prepare for some of the risks.
Professor Young, you've briefly touched upon this, but fierce competition is expected between SK Hynix and Samsung Electronics over next generation AI chips. While SK is currently showing a slight lead, how do you expect things to play out from here, and what will be the key to winning the tight race? You mentioned a bit about how Samsung's complacency could have been what led the company to trail behind SK, but if you could elaborate further.
Sure. Because Samsung hopefully has learned their lessons, they hopefully keep on their toes. I think what's optimistic here is that SK Hynix has sort of joined the race. So far, this global semiconductor competition has been between TSMC and Samsung, who's going to be able to develop the next generation chips the fastest, even though they're competing on the area of boundaries rather than memories. But now Hynix has shown that it can be a player in the technology race as well, because they pulled ahead, at least temporarily, from Samsung. Now, as I said, I expect Samsung to pass NVIDIA tests, and I expect the Samsung chips to compete on an equal level ground with Hynix chips. But I think Hynix has proven to be their player in this field, and Samsung will have to compete with Hynix. And one of the problems that we've seen in the not only in the semiconductor industry, but in the Korean exports in general, is that we may be falling behind on technology. Our whole export strategy depends on keeping ahead of China and try to catch up with Japan and United States as much as possible. But we seem to be falling behind in the last 3 or 4 years. But with Hynix becoming a player that's capable of competing against Samsung, Samsung and Hynix, hopefully by competing, will set the technology race back up again, and that will mean acceleration in Korea's technological output.
So Samsung Electronics is expected to pass NVIDIA's test. That piece of information may be the most important piece of information for investors tonight. Now, Professor Kim, the U.S., meanwhile, is reportedly mulling new restrictions on China's access to AI memory chips and other related equipment, an announcement of which is expected at the end of this month. What does this mean for South Korea's memory chip makers?
It means more regulatory challenges, of course. So the companies will face clearly increased regulatory pressure. So they need to carefully navigate U.S. export controls while trying to maintain the presence in the Chinese market, because that's also a big market to these two big companies. Second, I think market disruption is possible. So clearly China is a crucial market for Korean memory chip makers. And this new restrictions could disrupt the existing supply chains and sales channels. So we may see some short-term turbulence or decrease in revenue if this actually is going to be a binding regulation, especially for the AI chip segment, I think. But as just, we talked about, like the China actually is a big, the buyer for these type of, the products, and now the NVIDIA developed a separate chip product line, so it's not as cutting edge as the AI chips that they are selling as a major products, but slightly less advanced chips for the Chinese markets to bypass the regulation. So that's always the case, right? So the regulation hits, and then the companies try to find the loopholes and the bypasses to get around the difficulty. So this could increase the production cost and R&D cost and stuff like that, but it also may lead to some new opportunities, as well as also some unintended consequences as well. So for instance, like this restriction actually may benefit Korean firms, at least for the time being, because if somehow the China cannot really just develop all the new technologies for the time being, then maybe the Korean companies actually have some technological edges so that they can earn time until the China catches up. So that's benefit. But at the same time, because of the falsity and the short supply of these chips, China may just exert more effort to develop their own chips, and then I think they become even more lethal competitors in the future. So there are always the dynamic components here. So overall, I think this is a very complex situation. In the short term, it's more regulatory challenges, but in the future, it's more of a industry structure in terms of the number of competitors and things like that.
The U.S. presidential election is another big variable that could have a huge impact on South Korean firms. Dr. Yang, while we're yet to learn more about Democratic nominee Harris's trade policies, how would Trump's presidency under the overarching goal of MAGA, or Make America Great Again policy, affect Korea's semiconductor industry?
Well, problem is you can't really tell, because President Trump, when he was president, he wanted U.S. to have its own production facilities for semiconductors. He also wanted foreign investment to create jobs, but President Trump has said some worrying things, not necessarily about Samsung and Hynix. He said very few things about Samsung and Hynix during the campaign, but he did say something that was very worrying about TSMC and Taiwan. Trump said that TSMC does not deserve to get money from the United States, given all the money that U.S. paid for Taiwan's defense. Now, Korea is obviously in a similar situation, at least according to that statement, Trump, if he is elected, may go against further subsidies to Samsung and Hynix. But on the other hand, during his first term, when Samsung Hynix and LG established factories in the U.S. He said that he was very happy about them, and he wanted more foreign investment to create jobs in the United States. So we don't know which way he's going to jump in the next few months or the next year. But one optimistic thing that we should think about is that the subsidies are right now given by law, the IRA, and in order to overturn the IRA, you not only need the president to act as sort of an engine, but you also need both houses of Congress to be majority to be Republicans under Trump's command. Now, in the election, we will have to see whether that happens or not, but I think it's a very unlikely scenario that Trump will be elected president and both houses will be Republican-controlled. I think at least one of the houses will be under control of the Democrats, and in that case, it'll be very hard to overturn the federal law, IRA, that gives these subsidies. And also, I think the state government subsidies will remain because obviously state governments will like having these jobs created by Korean factories in their state.
And very quickly before we let you go, Professor Kim, many economists say South Korea, despite being a global leader in memory chips, lags behind when it comes to advanced next-generation AI technology. What efforts must be made to stay ahead of the game in the global AI chip rush?
The situation echoes the early 2000 IT industry evolution to me. And at that time, I think the markets were really rapidly changing because of this new technological development. I think it's kind of similar. So to stay competitive and catch up, I think South Korea must pursue multifaceted strategy, but the most important thing at the end of the day, what matters is human capital, I think, who can develop this upcoming AI industries. What is interesting, of course, for the AI is the whole point of AI is whether we can replace or help the part or all of the human capital. So, but I don't think the complete replacement is possible, but it's actually can really boost the labor productivity if it's well implemented. So the talent development is going to be really critical for the time being. Yes, I think we are a bit lagging in terms of like this, the chip making part, but I think at the end of the day, the software matters and also the human capital matter. Therefore, the education and all this more foundational basic studies actually will be more and more important because unlike the other businesses, the AI is actually requiring the correct and rigorous knowledge input to be useful. So I think the more basic studies and the education focus and the investment in the universities and R&Ds will be very important for the time being.
And that's where we'll conclude our discussion today. Thank you, as always, Professor Kim, for your insights.
Thank you very much.
And thank you, Dr. Young, for your perspectives.
Thank you.
And that brings us to the end of the show. Thank you for watching, and be sure to tune in same time tomorrow to join our conversation. Goodbye for now.